Welcome to the February 7th, 2024 meeting of the Thurston County Planning Commission. The Thurston County Planning Commission is a citizens advisory committee to the Board of County Commissioners on land use planning matters such as comprehensive plan and zoning ordinance amendments. Planning Commission actions are in the form of recommendations to the county commissioners, who are the final decision makers. All Planning Commission meetings are open to the public. Citizens are welcome to observe all Planning Commission briefings and work sessions. We also welcome public comment on those topics for which a public hearing has not yet been held. My name is Eric Casino, and this is my final introduction as chair, and I serve at large, and I live in the Lacey UGA. We'll continue the roll call of the planning commissioners down here. When we get to the end, we have a couple of new commissioners that will seek a bio from. So we'll start down here with Commissioner Kaiser.
Hey, I'm Sandy Kaiser. I'm currently working as the Government Relations Director at the Evergreen State College. I'm also Vice President of the Board of Capital Land Trust, and I've lived in the area for about 13 years.
Joel Hansen. I live in District 4, but I'm serving at large for Commissioner Menzer.
Barry Halverson, District 2.
Evan Pestinger, District 5.
Derek Day, District 1. Daniel Baumbarker, District 1.
Scott Wilson, District 4. Colin Bartlett, District 5.
Bill Fishburne. I'm not sure what my district is anymore because we just changed and I'm still not used to it.
Of course.
Does it say, oh, it says for Commissioner Wayne Fournier.
Commissioner Bartlett, would you care to tell us maybe a little bit of your background and why you were interested in being a planning commissioner?
Certainly. So I live in Tumwater, but I work downtown, and I've worked in downtown Olympia for better part of a decade. And I'm very close with the community, the houseless community that I actually came out of before I started to work down there. I'm a member of Burial Grounds Coffee Cooperative and board member on Orca Books Cooperative. I also have my own co-op, Wobbly Cup Roasters. So I've been involved in both the downtown working community and the underhouse community intensively. And I've seen the way that the underhouse community has been recriminalized recently. And I've seen the way that there is a false dichotomy between underhouse folks and environmental protection, which is my other big focus. I think it's time that we try to find housing for folks and a way that isn't criminalizing them. So that's my main focus for being on here, is to find a way to plan around the fact that we are much more of a city than we tend to want to be. Try to hold on to our environmental ethos that we proclaim.
Thank you. How about you, Commissioner Fishburne?
So resume wise, my name is Bill Fishburne. Been in Thurston County since about 1996. We first moved to Lacey. And in 2003, we decided we needed more space and got tired of listening to our neighbors fight. So we moved to 5 acres out in rural Thurston County on the city limits of Rainier. And been involved in the community in a number of ways. I'm back serving as the chair of the Hispanic Roundtable of South Sound. That just happened about 2 weeks ago. So I'm glad to be back in that position. It's a organization that I've served with since about 2008. That doesn't have anything to do with my real interest in the Planning Commission, though. Couple of things inspired me to seek the Planning Commission nomination. One is I live on 5 acres that has this little wetland at the back. It has water maybe 6 months out of the year. And for reasons that I still don't understand, when we moved in, we were told that we couldn't do anything within 150 feet of this wetland because 6 months out of the year had water in it. So that's one reason. You know, I have a lot of neighbors that have similar issues where they have certain restrictions on how they can use their rural property, and they were just sort of, they sort of inherited them when they got the property. Another reason is, another example, I guess, is another neighbor was interested in raising some cattle on his land, but he's got some fairly steep hills and decisions that have been made around steepness of ground and what kind of land use you could have for steepness of land on your property. So those sorts of things can, concern me and members are, neighbors and members of my community. So interested in seeing how those things come about and what I might do to change them if it's possible. My most recent venture is I'm trying to start a brewery in Rainier. And properties in a zone called residential commercial, which I think is a fabulous thing for rural areas. And I would like to see some more of that kind of land zoning in our area. And I don't know what I can do like that. So
Great, thank you very much.
you bet.
I should also mention that we have staff here with one of our favorite planners and our community planning manager, Ashley Arai, and Tasha Knight, who keeps everything going, and one of our county commissioners, Commissioner Klaus. And with that, I hope everybody's had an opportunity to look at the agenda. I do have a couple of amendments to make. One would be at 2.5, and that would be an opportunity for the commissioner to address the planning commission. And then another one at 7.5, which would be a subcommittee report update from the chair of that subcommittee, which was I guess Commissioner Day will be given that. So with that amended agenda, I'm hoping that somebody else would think that that's okay. And if so,
I move to approve the agenda as amended.
been moved and seconded to approve the agenda for this evening's meeting. With that, I'll call for the vote.
Commissioner Baumgartner. Commissioner Halverson.
Aye.
Commissioner Hanson.
Aye.
Commissioner Kaiser.
Aye.
Commissioner Nelson.
Aye.
Commissioner Fishburne. Commissioner Pessinger.
Aye.
Commissioner Bartlett.
Aye.
Vice Chair Day.
Aye.
Chair Casino.
Aye, that agenda has been approved and we'll be using it tonight. Next on our agenda is the approval of our meeting minutes from our January 17th, 2024 meeting.
I move we approve the minutes from January 17th, 2024 and accept the audio as the official record.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the meeting minutes and accept the audio as the official meeting record. Is there any discussion? Call for the vote.
Commissioner Baumgartner.
Aye.
Commissioner Halverson.
Since I wasn't here, I'll abstain.
Commissioner Hanson.
Aye.
Commissioner Kaiser.
Aye.
Commissioner Nelson.
Aye.
Commissioner Fishburne.
Since I wasn't here for the entirety of the meeting, I'll abstain as well.
Commissioner Pessinger.
Aye.
Commissioner Bartlett.
Abstain.
Vice Chair Day.
Aye.
Chair Casino.
Aye, well, that's enough to accept those meeting minutes from January 17th and accept the audio as the official meeting record. With that, we're gonna move on to Commissioner Klaus. If you have anything you'd like to say to us, we'd be happy to hear from you.
Well, I'm super excited to be here. I actually just took a tour of the CPED department next door today. I walked through there when I first got sworn in and was being introduced to everybody, but today I got to meet the team and it was super cool. Like the morale is just really great in there. Also, when I campaigned, I primarily have a background in human services and degree in psychology, so land use wasn't really a strength of mine. I felt when I campaigned, but I talked to folks like Mr. Halverson, Commissioner Halverson. We talked about lake management districts and issues around that. So I've kind of grown to become really connected to this issue. And I just wanted to kind of attend and see how your meetings go. I wanted to kind of introduce Commissioner Bartlett. I'm super excited about you being appointed. So welcome. And Bill Fishburne, I know you've been here, but right, you've been here.
I visited once.
Okay, cool. Well, it's really nice to meet both of you and I'm just really excited to be here. So here to learn from you and kind of just see how it goes.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you for coming. Does anybody have any questions for, well, are you even taking questions from us today? Anybody have
I'll
any
take questions.
questions?
Yeah, if you have questions, I'll take questions.
Anybody have any questions for the commissioner?
Good, we really grilled Ty.
Yeah, we did. We did. Well, thanks for coming. We appreciate you showing up and kind of seeing what we do.
I might too.
Yeah, just
Please do.
just quickly, Thank you for coming. Been great to see you again. I think I've only seen you on Zoom, but you mentioned that this is an new area for you, but an area of interest. From what you know, what would you identify as some of the top land use issues that we should be thinking about?
That's a really good question. When I got sworn in, one of my first things I was asked to do was vote on the comp plan. People probably saw that meeting, I'm assuming, but it was a tough decision. I had no idea what was going on. I was brand new. And I was like, hey, can I please get some more time with this? The reason why I wanted more time is because I saw the discrepancy in the vote for the Lacey Joint Plan. And I was like, why would so many planning commissioners vote against that? What's happening here? I need to look at this closer. When I looked into it, I realized it was the low density consolidation issue. And I decided to talk to Mayor Ryder, figure out what was going on in Lacey. And I just looked into it quite a bit, and I started becoming more connected to it and seeing how it overlaps with my interests. Sorry, I need some water. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just, as you can tell, you can probably see, I'm super excited. I love learning new things, and I think as far as land use goes, since I'm new at learning like the actual pieces of, like the policy side, what I can see as I'm learning policy is like, it's important to connect with the community when we're making changes. So I had the idea of like, maybe I should canvass a low density zone that exists in Lacey and see what the benefits are. Talk to people who live there, make sure that we're making smart decisions. That's really where I dove in, and I'm new, so it's really one of the first issues I've kind of looked into as far as land use, but I could see how we can really think of planning for growth and taking care of the community at the same time and making sure that we're meeting people's needs.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your question.
Does anybody else have anything for the committee?
First, thanks for serving and, well, thanks for running in the first place. Thanks for serving now. I guess my only question is, how have you found the job so far? Are you settling in?
I love it. It's awesome. It's kind of hard to get used to, like, I don't know, just being in this routine. Like, I seem to focus better later at night. When I learned today from Ashley that there's a planning commission meeting tonight, I was like, perfect, because this is when my brain starts working better. So I stuck around when everyone else left, and I mean, it's just kind of cool to be able to have a space where I can learn about all of these things whenever I want. So like, I really get to dive into issues that I care about. Meeting new people has been awesome. Connecting again with people who I met on the campaign trail has been great. And it's kind of weird because it's like, the dynamic has changed. There are people who I've built a lot of rapport with or had community connections with almost my whole life. And now we're working in a professional capacity together. So kind of trying to like transition and like have these dual relationships or connections with people, that's been really interesting too. So yeah, I don't know, I get to learn a lot about how the county works. It's just like really the best job that I've ever had.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
Does anybody else have anything for the commissioner? All right, well, thank you very much for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We're gonna move on to the public communication portion of our meeting, and we don't have anybody here in the boardroom, but it does look like we have some attendees, so I'll go through some rules. Those participating via Zoom, please choose the raise your hand option to address the planning commission. You'll be promoted to a panelist when it's your turn to speak and to be seen. To be seen, please turn on your camera. If you are dialing in, press *9 to raise your hand. Make sure you also choose *6 to unmute yourself. The 3-minute timer will show on one of the video screens to help keep track of time. And so if we have anybody online that would like to address the planning commission, please raise your hand. We'll give you an opportunity. Well, I don't think we have any public comment for tonight. So we're going to move on to the next portion of our meeting, which is the elections. And at this point, I will be taking any nominations. We already have a couple of nominations, but if any come from the floor, we'll certainly be taking them. And we're going to start out with the vice chair position. And the vice chair position, the first nomination I did have was for Commissioner Hanson. So I don't know if you'd accept that nomination.
I would.
Are there any other nominations from the floor for the vice chair? Having no other nominations, we will take a vote to confirm. So all those in favor of confirming Commissioner Hanson as vice chair, Tasha will take a roll call for.
Commissioner Day,
Aye.
Commissioner Baumgartner,
Aye.
Commissioner Casino,
Aye.
Commissioner Halverson,
Aye.
Commissioner.
I'll vote for myself. I didn't when I ran for ASB president, but I will now.
Did you win?
Commissioner Kaiser,
Aye.
Commissioner Nelson.
Aye.
Commissioner Fishburne.
Aye.
And Commissioner Pessinger,
Aye.
Commissioner Bartlett.
Well, congratulations, Commissioner Hanson. You're now the vice chair of the Planning Commission. With that, I do have a nomination for the chair of the Planning Commission. That nomination is for Commissioner Day. Will you accept that nomination?
I would.
Are there any other nominations for the floor for the chair of the Planning Commission? Hearing no other nominations.
Sorry. You gotta call for it three times.
Oh, I got to call for three. Any other nominations for the second time? You're gonna.
No.
Just making sure you can
Big
count to
number.
three.
Fingers and toes, guys. Third call for nominations for chair of the Planning Commission. Having no other nominations, we'll call for the vote for Commissioner Day as chair of the Planning Commission.
Commissioner Baumgartner,
Aye.
Commissioner Casino.
Aye.
and
Aye.
Commissioner Hanson.
Aye.
Commissioner Kaiser,
Aye.
Commissioner Nelson,
Aye.
Commissioner Fishburne,
Aye.
Commissioner Pessinger,
Aye.
Commissioner Bartlett,
Aye.
Commissioner Day.
Aye. Fantastic. Commissioner Day is the new chair of the Thurston County Planning Commission, and as such, you take over right now.
Enthusiastic.
All right, well, thank you. I'll take a moment of personal privilege to thank the outgoing chair, Mr. Casino.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for the timely meetings and the run through the docket that you've led us on. Much appreciated. All right, moving on, we will move on to an introduction of joint planning, Tumwater UGA and joint code update. With Ms. Davis.
I'm gonna do a little intro if that's okay. Okay. So because we have a lot of new commissioners, we thought we would roll out some of the work that's gonna be coming to the planning commission over the next year. Sort of a soft launch of stuff instead of coming immediately with like, here's 100 pages of code and we need you to review it in 2 weeks. So the first thing we thought we would soft launch to lay the groundwork for future work that will be coming our way is our joint code updates. There are going to be 3 that our team is going to be working on over the next few years. And so Leah here, who's been our lead on joint planning efforts, is we're going to do sort of a broad brush introduction of the topic, starting from like, what is joint planning and why is it so exciting? To a question, sort of a concept question that we would like to get your feedback on as we move forward with the updates. So there are no specific decisions that need to be made today. It's really an opportunity to learn, ask questions, and then have that bigger picture concept discussion about joint codes.
Great, thank you, Ashley. Good evening, everyone. It's so nice that you're here. I appreciate it. We're gonna just do a brief slideshow. Oops, that wasn't. To kind of introduce the topic of what joint planning is and how it ties in with the development code. Yeah, there we go. Okay, we're good. So we're the overview of a very high level and brief overview of the Growth Management Act, and more specifically how it affects and informs the joint planning process. We'll look at UGA boundaries, what they are, what they're good for. We'll put our toe into the development code. It will not be a dive because we won't, like Ashley said, we won't be having any decisions tonight, but just to introduce the topic to get you thinking about it. And then we'll talk about the next steps. So the Growth Management Act has many mandates. Some of them are, do impact the urban growth areas and the joint planning process. Urban growth areas are areas that abut the cities, and they are county jurisdiction and will likely be annexed into the cities in the future. Not always, but likely. A joint plan is a comp plan for the urban growth areas. So it's a shared 20-year vision of those urban growth areas. It's shared by the city of that urban growth area, the county, and the people of Thurston County. The primary goal of urban growth areas and joint plans is to get those urban growth areas to transition from rural level development to urban level development or densities. We want to concentrate populations into the urban growth areas because services will already or will exist in those areas, services such as transit, sewer, water. This increased and concentrated population in cities and urban growth areas helps protect the rural character of the rest of the county. It helps protect rural resources such as agriculture and forestry. And it also can help alleviate some of the affordable housing issues. I think we all know that historically and probably still it's less expensive to live in a multi-housing in an apartment than it is in a single family dwelling. And so increasing those densities in the UGAs can alleviate affordable housing issues somewhat. So the joint plan is also a frame. Yes,
Is it okay, Chair, if we ask questions now?
Is it all right by staff?
sure.
Is there, on the urban growth areas, is there any requirement if it becomes obvious that a city is not going to annex an area that they should remove it, or it's just left to their own discretion?
Well, to some degree, it's left to their own discretion. There's an area in the city of Lacey that's Thurston County, UGA, Lacey UGA. And it really needs to be annexed, but there's a bunch of obstacles associated with annexing that. And so the city has been a little reluctant to do that. These other areas that are on the fringes of the city where most urban growth areas are more likely to be annexed because the cities can extend those services, water and sewer, into those areas as they develop and concurrently develop that infrastructure and have it paid for. But when there are old areas like Tanglewild, it's hard to fund the sewer and water necessary to bring those into the city.
And I will say that the state just in the last leg session is looking at new tools or additional tools for cities and counties to allocate growth in the UGAs. So they're calling it UGA swap. If you want to search UGA swap. It's a different way of looking at how urban growth areas are managed and just providing more flexibility to cities to say this area, we don't think we're going to be able to annex maybe in the next 50 years, maybe 100, like the McAllister geological sensitive area of Lacey. That's a really good example. Or with Tumwater, areas that they might need to set aside for their habitat conservation plan. But the flexibility to say, although this area might not be appropriate, this area up here, like where we're getting more intense development and there's more pressure, how about we take this one out and put that one in and do more of a trade? So that's why they're calling it a swap. So there are new mechanisms being developed. They are largely untested and still trying to figure out how it fits in with that broader framework. But I definitely think those tools are necessary because the UGAs that were put in place quite a long time ago. And we've learned a lot and HCPs didn't exist back then. And we didn't necessarily know how challenging, or the cities didn't know how challenging it would be to extend services. And without services, you're never going to get that level of growth that Leah
Right.
mentioned. You're never going to get multifamily development or more intense commercial or industrial development because there's no water sewer.
Yeah, I think Commissioner Nelson he's been here long enough that he experienced. The Tumwater UGA was reduced by quite a bit because some of the areas in that, were they flood areas, is that right? And they couldn't be
I
developed,
think, yeah, they're higher groundwater.
high groundwater, so they couldn't be developed to the density required for an urban growth area, so they were removed from the UGA. And we have a similar situation, you might all recall last year when we updated the Olympia joint plan. There's an area up on the north UGA that's hard to sewer because of environmental constraints. And so I think they're talking about removing that from the UGA because it should only be developed to a lower density. So,
Thank
Yeah.
you so much. Those are all the examples I was wondering about.
yeah,
Commissioner Hanson, you had a question?
A quick question, but first a comment, if the folks at the state are looking at ways to solve the problem of maybe resources to extend sewer and whatnot, I could make some pretty strong arguments that climate commitment funds could be used for that. But the question I have, because I haven't looked at the maps in a little while, some of the islands of county inside the city of Tumwater, have most of those been annexed now?
most of them have.
Okay.
The little ones have,
Like
there's
Gold
still a
Creek
kind of
or
a.
Goldcrest and some of those areas are now part of the city?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and we'll be looking at the map tonight and some of
Okay.
those, it's a dated map, so
Okay.
we'll talk about that too. Okay, so the joint plan, which is the comprehensive plan for the urban growth areas, is also the framework for the development code. The development code is how we implement the vision in the joint plan. So we have the goals and policies in the joint plan. We adopt the development code to hopefully meet those goals and policies. So again, just to say it in a different way, the intent of the UGAs and the joint plan is to match the city's codes as closely as possible. And that helps provide predictability and seamlessness for the people who live there when those areas, if and when those areas are annexed into the cities. So that's kind of the goal of the UGAs, and that's the agreement that we have with those cities, is to do our best to match the goals and the goals, policies, and codes to get that done.
So if I maybe give an
Yeah.
example, or if you want to give an example of like predictability for code, where it comes into play is, let's say you build a development under county code, but if it gets annexed and you want to do an addition on that building and the city's code is different, all of a sudden you could have to do a lot of additional improvements on that site to bring it up to city code. Essentially, like, it's non-conforming when it comes into the city without that level of predictability that Leah is referencing. So it is felt on the ground by property owners when they have to interface with our permitting departments and whatnot.
Mhm. Thank you.
Commissioner Pessinger?
Commissioner Klaus mentioned the recent Lacey joint plan thing, and I think for us, there were some planning commission members that understood better than others, but I would like to know better, if the county had not agreed at this moment in time to the joint plan with Lacey, what would have been the impact of Lacey?
Well, that included a lot of citizen initiated zoning requests. There were, I think, 3 of those. They may or may not have been accomplished in a different way, but they were included with the joint plan. So those people may be left hanging without the zoning they wanted. The low density zoning consolidation wouldn't have happened. And then we would really not have anything to base the updated development code on. It would kind of stall everything in the Lacey UGA, because you can't adopt the development code if you don't have goals and policies that you're trying to meet with that.
Thank you.
Sure. So one of the tools that we have with the cities and the county is the countywide planning policies. They cover a lot of things, but there are some sections in there that deal specifically with joint planning. That also provides a how-to for expanding and reducing the urban growth boundaries. It kind of gives an idea of who and when provides utilities for those higher densities. And then it's a basic agreement on how we go about joint planning between the county staff and the city staff. So it gives us some guidelines and encourages a lot of collaboration. Thurston County has 6 joint planning cities. The top 4 on the list have recent joint plan updates, which a lot of people here were involved in. They weren't too painful, I don't think. Tenino and Rainier are gonna have to wait until after we finish the periodic update to the comprehensive plan that we're working on. So we hope to get to those in 2026 when that's done. Let's see.
And just for Tenino and Rainier, that was their request.
Oh, okay.
To wait, rather than us saying, nope, sorry, we don't have capacity. They thought it would be more helpful to get through the periodic update and then revisit the joint plans.
All right. So it's important to note that joint plans follow the comp plan. So we very rarely will you see a joint plan go out and beyond goals and policies that exist in the counties or the city's comprehensive plan. They are based on the most recently adopted comprehensive plan for the city and the county. And because the UGAs are likely to be annexed into the city, the joint plan update is based largely on the city's comprehensive plan. As you know, the goal is to increase the density in those UGAs. So ideally, public outreach is conducted for joint plan updates. But if it is closely followed by a joint plan update is closely on the heels of a comprehensive plan, sometimes the jurisdiction will rely on the extensive outreach done during the comprehensive plan phase. And also, depending on the level of changes in a joint plan, the level of outreach may vary. And I'm thinking about the Tumwater joint plan, which was updated in 2021. There were 3 separate rezoning proposals that the city made of the county. And so the county staff did a pretty extensive outreach to the people who lived in and around those 3 zoning areas. We sent them letters describing what the proposal was, requested that they submit comments, and we invited them to both public hearings. So that was pretty extensive outreach for that specific thing to very specific people. Let's see. And then I want to say that once the city drafts the joint plan and provides it to the county for review, county staff sends it to all the different departments for review of theirs, like transportation, parks and rec, emergency services, so that those departments can review that and ensure that there's no conflict with county goals and policies in the joint plan. And then we get that back from them with their comments. And before it goes to the public, the entire joint plan is sent to the prosecuting attorney's office to ensure that there are no conflicts in those goals and policies with the state law. So here is a visual aid for the joint plan process. Once the city and the county come up with a draft that we've agreed upon and we all, are assured that the goals and policies are not in conflict, we start scheduling planning commission work sessions, at least one, sometimes several, usually several on a joint plan. Once we have a draft that the planning commission is happy with, we hold a public hearing so that we can get plenty of public input on what the joint plan will look like in the future and how it will impact people's lives. We almost always have a work session after the public hearing to incorporate any public comment that we've received and consider all of that. And then at the end of that process, the planning commission provides a written recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners. That recommendation, sometimes there's disagreement in the planning commission, and that's done by democracy. So there's a vote on what gets recommended to the board. The staff takes that recommendation, all of the public comments received up to that point, and the draft to the Board of County Commissioners for at least one work session. And then the Board of County Commissioners sets and holds a public hearing to get more public input, possibly another work session after the public hearing so that they can consider and discuss any public input. And then the Board of County Commissioners takes a final action on the joint plan. That's always done with the comprehensive plan at the end of the year because the joint plans are literally a chapter of the comprehensive plan. So we only get one opportunity a year to update joint plans and the comp plan, and they're done together. So this is the actual time that we spent on the Tumwater joint plan. The city provided staff with a draft of a joint plan in 2020, and we sent it to all the different departments, collaborated with the city in the second half of that year. And then in the spring of 2021, we started holding joint work sessions with the County Planning Commission and Tumwater Planning Commission. We had a few work sessions. We held a joint public hearing. And then we ended up with 2 different recommendations for the Board of County Commissioners. The Thurston County Planning Commission made one recommendation, and the City of Tumwater Planning Commission, they make a recommendation actually to their council, who then writes a letter recommending adoption to the Board of County Commissioners. We then took all of that information and had some work sessions, at least one, I don't remember now how many, had at least one work session, held a public hearing. And then at the end of that year, it was adopted with the comp plan update. Yes,
Just a question about the outreach process that you were
Yes.
talking about. So you said you reach out to a select number of folks sort of fairly early on in the process to sort of get what their goals are. Is that the folks who live in that, on that property, or is it just the folks who collect rent from it?
the notices are sent to the owners of the property because I don't know why, because that's what we have.
Oh, I think, isn't it owners and residents?
It might be
I
residents
think it's
too.
owners and residents. We work with our IT staff and usually it's the actual address of the property and the owner of
That's
the
true,
property.
that's true. yeah.
So it's both.
Excellent.
Yeah.
thank you.
So
I
it's
have a
the site
question.
address and the owner address.
So what if, like, what about in the case of an apartment complex? Would it be on the owner to distribute that notice to their residents, or would we have anything to do with making sure like every person? Cause when I was campaigning, this was something people were really upset about. So I actually kind of wrote down a similar question when I was listening about like the boundaries of like how far out do you go when you're notifying people about changes in growth and development. A lot of people are like, I was right on the boundary and I really would have liked to have an input, but I didn't get the notice, so I didn't go give comment. What can we do to like alleviate that or just ensure that everybody is aware?
So if I can chime in, because part of it's a resource issue. So like, if it's a permit, like on our development side, there are specific notification requirements, and they're always mailed notices. Long range planning, it kind of depends on the project. So if it's a rezone, we do that same thing because it's really property specific. If it's like a bigger long range planning effort, because it's so resource intensive to do mailings, like costly, they're really, really expensive,
Yeah.
as you know.
Yeah.
Having a campaign that, like we have a project right now in a Nisqually sub-area plan, and we basically got one shot at sending out mailers. And we did it as early in the process as possible so that folks would get engaged, sign up for an email, because moving forward, we won't have the funds
Yeah.
to do more mailings. So I think it's tough. I think it's one of those like a nut we're continually trying to crack, like how do we get folks to the table and engaging on the topics that are gonna impact them directly? And we are always open to feedback on that. And it does look a little bit different with like Thurston 2045, where we don't have the resources to send out a mailer to everybody that is part of Thurston County. I wish we did, that would be great if we had that. But in lieu of that, like, how do we get the word out to folks? Cause it has the potential to impact them. So always looking for ideas on that front. And yeah, open to receive.
Yeah, it gets harder and harder as all of our attention gets split between so many different things. We don't have local news hardly anymore,
Yeah.
so we don't hardly have a newspaper. There are people that people read.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So it gets really complicated to try and do outreach. We do have open houses and we try to inform as many people as possible. You just have them for the Nisqually sub area.
Yeah, and we made sure to post that. So one of the strategies was like, make sure that that meeting just isn't about us. So we partnered with a number of different agencies and then they helped us get the word out to their groups as well. And then we made sure to post physical flyers in locations like the gas station out there, just where people, you know, they might come and go.
And you had great turnout.
Yeah.
For an open house, I mean, it sounds bad when like 60 people is a really good turnout, but for an open house, that was awesome for us. So sorry.
I just want to add on to that and for the benefit of new commissioners, that with the comprehensive plan update that we're all preparing for and getting excited about, the staff talked to us a fair amount about the outreach plan. And I think we made some specific requests to go more broadly and to try and get more communication out to groups that are not normally reached, and gave a long list of potential places. And I think a lot of that was done pretty successfully. I think you all are still open to more feedback on that and continuing to improve the outreach plan. So I think there has been some pretty good improvements.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just had one of our Phyllis Farrell, who you might know, I think she's attended planning commission meetings. She was kind enough to reach out to our local legislative district offices and say, hey, who do you know who wants to engage in housing? Who have you been engaging with on housing that we should be pulling into this process? And like, that's the kind of help that it's so great. We got those contacts for groups and we were able to like put them on the list, and Miriam's already reaching out to them. So it's tough. We're willing to put in the work with the resources we have. And Miriam Biasian is our lead, and she's actually gonna be here. I think we might even bump her up to the 21st. So you all, the new commissioners will get to meet her. But we have an updated outreach report as well as a plan for moving forward that she wants to run by the planning commission.
thank you.
Is it okay if I ask another question?
Sure.
I don't wanna hold things up, but I just think this is like really an interesting conversation because land use is so important. And like I said, when I started running for commissioner, I didn't know anything about land use. And now here I am. A lot of community members don't know anything about it until it impacts them. And like, I'm more interested, I mean, not more interested, kind of, but I have the background in like the social side of things. But it's kind of the same concept, it's like, we need to inform people about land use, even if it doesn't impact them. And on the flip side, it's like, we're asking people who usually kind of have a contentious relationship. We're like, hey, why don't you look at it that way? On our side too, like people who are in part of marginalized communities. Many of us might not have a lot of connection with those communities. But like, we can kind of see things from each other's perspective. And I just think that's a really cool concept to make sure we're doing outreach effectively. So I was kind of wondering, like, have you ever done like, try to utilize the power of like volunteers, getting the community, like maybe when you send the mailers to people, you could do it in a way that's engaging and be like, hey, we have this educational campaign. Tell your neighbors, we're making this change here. We're considering something new. Like right when the idea comes, because that way people really can get involved early on. And like, if we make it fun, maybe we could put funds towards like an event, a big event or something where it's like, hey, this is your chance to give input before we start talking about contracts with people. Cause that's the details. People are like, who's this contractor? Are they ethical? Are they coming in from somewhere that's not in our area? So like the money could be going to a different jurisdiction outside of Thurston County. You know what I mean? Like if developers are really putting their funds in other communities, then we're not really like boosting our own economy. I don't know. I know I'm going on and on, but I don't know. I think outreach would be really cool. And I'd personally be willing to even go knock on doors. I think a lot of people would be excited about that, and we could really get the community involved in things that they might not be paying attention to.
And the spectrum of like engagement is inform, outreach, engage, empower. And what you just mentioned is a really awesome, like empowering, like
Mhm.
I think I'll definitely chat with Mira about like what that would look like. From like the county perspective of like, can we, I mean, you all are our volunteers and we are
Yeah.
very appreciative of you.
Yeah,
Miriam's
But
child count as a volunteer, because she was kind of a super weapon at that event.
I'm sorry.
Does Miriam's child count?
Oh, I know. You all will get to see pictures of Miriam's daughter, who is like really awesome at getting
People to fill out surveys.
fill out surveys from like kids all the way up to grandparents. So yes, I think expanding our base.
I was just curious if possibly we could, some of the new commissioners could get examples of the notices that are sent to folks.
that'd be awesome.
I'm curious what we're asking, if it's still hyper paper driven, or if we're encouraging them to sign up via an email, or whether
Yeah,
we've explored having folks maybe sign up for text blasts, which are exceedingly cheaper than
that's a
yeah, because if you build a decent text database of a zip code or an area, it's very easy to send a notice and you're paying
Yeah.
cents per notification that way, which could be a force multiplier for trying to reach folks who might not have super consistent mail access, or, you know, folks who might rent and their address may have got something, but they could be subletting, you know, as Olympia gets increasingly less affordable, more and more people are living in single apartments that really aren't designed for that many people, but that's how their situation goes. And, you know, the person who pays the bill might see it, but the people who would be very interested in an urban growth area, because that could be
Yeah.
potentially their new housing, are never going to even find out about it.
Right.
Yeah, I've even had, sorry, I don't wanna just cut people off. I wrote something down similar to that actually too. Like utilizing the power of social media. You mentioned text banking. I didn't even think of that. That's a great idea. I used text banking when I was campaigning. A lot of people get annoyed, but it spreads awareness and that's important. And like, yeah, I would be willing to share on my social media too. And I don't have an official commissioner social media yet, but that could be another way to kind of get that educational campaign going, is like do it online and do it in the mailers. Connect the mailers to the online platform. People can engage both ways.
Yeah, and this is all really great. And I just hope that like you don't lose your steam, because when Miriam comes, she's really the person that is gonna like process all of this and like be able to put it all together. But yeah, so it's interesting, our mailers, we had sort of, for cost reasons, had reduced it down to a postcard. And the long-term ag zoning project that a lot of you commissioners were involved in, we got a lot of feedback, especially from the older members of our community, that postcard meant nothing to them. They were like, ag, my parcel, like, I don't do ag, it's forest, like, what is this about? And they just threw it away. And so we got a specific request to like, write me a letter, like, write me a letter and like, take up the space on the paper to tell me like, what is going on and why should I care? Not saying we did it perfectly, but we're trying to like, we listened. And the next thing we sent out a long-term ag was a letter. Still got feedback on that, but, and then Nisqually Sudbury Open House was the same thing, like a letter. If we're gonna do it, let's do it in a way that is hopefully gonna connect with folks more and get them to understand more, especially folks that might not engage in social media or whatnot. So yeah, this is a great discussion, and please write down comments and be willing to repeat them when Miriam's here.
Do you
So-
record these meetings?
Yes, so she can listen
Okay,
to
okay.
it.
It is the official.
That's good, but the back and forth, I think she'd really like, she's this lovely, engaging person that will want to like use this to spark ideas that she can make a plan.
So one thing I would like to say, and I don't know if Manager Rai would agree here, but when we think about like a shifting paradigm and like how we get information out, and I think different expectations in the community about being engaged, that's a resource and capacity question for staff and like the resources to be able to do that kind of work. So since you're here and a commissioner, I'm gonna make a plug that like if we want the staff to be empowered to do this kind of work, resources are crucial. And that looks like capacity and dollars to send out mailers and even just the time to think about how to do things in a new way is capacity. So.
Yeah,
Thank
Miriam,
you. Yeah.
one person did almost all the outreach last summer with her daughter. And she's,
Really?
yeah, And she's incredible and she hit an event almost, one or two events almost every week. But yeah, it was one person.
Good people get stolen.
Yeah, I know, exactly. No, we need
We're supposed to ask for raises for all of the planning.
Yeah, 100% raise for all of us. Make it 1,000. At the risk of stating the obvious, I mean, as our, the population of Thurston County, is increasingly diverse. People will be asking, you know, the way to connect with everybody will be all of the above. Because there will be people that want a letter in their mailbox that they go to at the same time every day at 3 p.m. right after the mailman leaves. And they'll sit at the kitchen table and they'll read it, and then there'll be people that want to text. Because they don't even go to the mailbox ever and don't care if anything comes in the mail. Or, you know, whatever. Imperfect examples, I'm sure, but that there's just gonna be people who are going to be communicated with in different ways and who are going to, you know, interact with information with the county in different ways. So that makes your job really hard.
Yeah, and we're in a really odd place where we have these very different ways of communicating across generations. And we're in a tough transition, probably another 20 years before we transition all to this digital stuff and get rid of more paper. It's a,
Until you make a TikTok video.
And then there'll be new things.
oh, I don't do that.
Are we making one right now?
Commissioner Bartlett, how are we doing on time?
This is
How do you
the
feel?
only agenda
Okay.
item, and
Right.
so, and I don't necessarily, if you all don't wanna stay here beyond a certain amount of time, but I think having this conversation is relationship building, it's better foundation for moving forward, so you take the time that you all need.
And I'm not like Commissioner Klaus. I don't like working at night.
Oh, no.
Oh, right.
We can
But
let
I'll stay here
her.
as long as you
I
want.
know.
and That's definitely stay here.
I think we can respect boundaries, but go ahead. Commissioner Bartlett.
It's appreciated. So yeah, I completely agree that the diversity of tactics is really useful in this context. And part of that is really targeting. Do we have information on folks aside from their contact? Like ages, for example, you mentioned demographics. My guess is probably not.
We're starting to collect zip codes.
Exciting. Yeah, I'm wondering if there's a way to parse the information that we have to better target folks so that you guys don't have to spend a ton of your resources sending letters to people for whom they don't want them and sending texts to people who don't want them. Obviously, some of that's gonna happen regardless. And this is a conversation for when Miriam's here for sure to focus on. But something I'd definitely like us all to keep in mind is like, how can we better reach people where they're at?
Just go to the auditor's office. It's on the voter rolls.
Mhm. I mean, yeah, there's ways to do that, but that goes right back to the resources question of who has time to go and compare those notes. That was my comment.
So slight diversion, but I have a point I would like to make this. So in World War II, when we were trying to, I know, in World War II, we were trying to improve our plane design, so our pilots returned. The thing that they looked at on these planes coming back that were all shot up with holes was where they weren't shot at. And the idea is where they aren't shot at is likely the vulnerable points because no one is coming back with those points hit. And so not necessarily looking at the populations who aren't here, but who is, right? And then extrapolating the opposite. Where are weak points? Like, you know, if we're only getting a certain age demographic, economic demographic here, right? Okay, we know that, you know, those parts of the wings can take damage and they're still gonna show up, but the other parts maybe not. And then the other point I'd like to make, or at least question I'd like to ask is, do we do any translated materials of what we put out? Okay, I'm just gonna.
We're actually focused more on transcreation than translating where we can. And that's really like rethinking how a document will be perceived instead of just translating text. And so we're actually working that into our grant proposals and our funding requests it costs more, but we think it's really valuable.
And the languages that you're focusing on are what, primarily Spanish and Vietnamese? I think those are the two largest in Thurston outside of English, right?
Yeah, but even for some of the Thurston 2045, I think we went beyond that. And I mean, it's not perfect, but we switched to a new survey platform. And one of the reasons we did that is because it offers at least like the translation, it's
Mm-hmm.
Google Translate, but it was better than what we had. So that someone who wants to take the survey can at least,
Machine translation isn't the best, but it's better than nothing.
so do you wanna cover what is the UGA on that map?
Yes,
Yeah?
yes.
One, we had one,
Oh.
I think one question and then you can.
Well, maybe my question will kind of follow into the next part of your presentation, so it might be a good segue. It's not about outreach, but it's a concern that I've had with joint planning and with kind of how we look at it sometimes. I know that there's not total siloing between public works and long-range planning and CPED. But I think in joint planning, when basically what I'm getting at is the drainage design and erosion control manual does not have public oversight input on it to any degree. And that particular manual, the drainage manual, has huge impacts on what we should be considering in our comp plan. But we don't even address it in any way. I don't know if there is a way to make it so there is a nexus between the drainage manual and the comp plan, but I think there needs to be. And I'm not sure how to do that, but how we can do land use planning while we're not considering drainage design and erosion control makes zero sense to me.
I'll put Larry on it.
Put Larry and Kevin.
Yeah, Larry, they go as a team, so
Yeah.
so our group includes, just so you know, community planning.
Mhm.
You all are gonna see our docketed projects, our long-range planning projects. We also include all the conservation planning for the county, as well as water services and data monitoring, as well as climate data monitoring and stormwater management planning. So
But I know that like Tim is the manager or the administrator of the DDECM
in public works,
in
yeah.
Public Works, and so he's totally siloed out of this process.
He's not on the comp plan. We have roped him in.
Yeah. So the more of those guys we can rope in and the more input that the public can have on the drainage manual in conjunction with the comp plan, I think would be very beneficial because as Commissioner Dave very well says, maybe you could say it again.
All of our stormwater problems are a result of bad land use decisions somebody else made somewhere.
Thank you very much.
So I think just briefly to that point, I do know that the Department of Commerce has a series of grants that they're gonna be releasing. And one of the specific targets of that grant program is to integrate land use and stormwater planning during the comprehensive plan.
Oh, that'd be fantastic.
Wow.
So those are coming through, they're tagged as salmon recovery and comp plan updates, but it's actually a much broader grant program. David Pater at the Department of Commerce is one of the staff leads on that right now.
It hasn't been issued yet,
It has not been issued
Okay.
yet. It is.
I've been keeping my eye
forthcoming.
out.
So,
because we have some other ideas of integrating climate data into stormwater planning as well.
That would be my question.
okay.
Yeah, we have to, yeah. We're very excited
You
about the
should- have you
prospect.
talked to
We need to find a
Kevin?
grant.
Have you talked to Kevin? Cause there's a grant application that closes on the 12th that
Yep, 5 days from now,
eligible.
we've already tried to find some partners.
Okay, good. I think I had one last thing. I don't remember it.
I'm sorry to throw you off.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's an
you got me
energy
excited.
component. Talk to me after the meeting.
Okay, this is great. If you, just so you're aware, most of these long-range planning documents that you will be looking at without funding are not actionable. Like the implementation a lot of times relies on funding. So if you know of funding mechanisms that seem to pair well with a particular initiative or plan or policy, like we are also open to receive that too, because it is hard to track them all.
And I remember now, there's a planning guidance that the Puget Sound Regional Council put out, that it is specifically about integrating comprehensive and stormwater planning.
Can you get that to us?
It is on the Puget Sound Regional Council's website.
So the regional, so we also have a regional council, just so you're aware, it's Thurston Regional Planning Council, and they're sort of the regional entity that, at least here, do our natural hazard mitigation plan and flood hazard planning, transportation planning, like regional transportation planning, and allow the regional climate planning. But PSRC is the Central Puget Sound equivalent.
And they're very well resourced.
They're
and
very well
reach,
resourced.
much further, I think, into the planning processes.
Yes. Okay,
Okay.
back to UGAs. Thank you for all that. though.
That was a lot. So the city of Tumwater is in dark green, and as somebody pointed out, these small areas of beige up in here have since been incorporated or annexed into the city. We do discourage islands of UGA within city. So the beige area is the urban growth area. That is the area that the county has jurisdiction in. We zone that, we regulate that, we come up with the development codes for that, and we issue permits in those areas. We try to make them very compatible with the cities, but those areas that are beige are county jurisdiction. So this is a close-up look of the southern. Hello?
Have we ever found if there is any kind of mechanism where the county can tell the city, you need to annex these islands? It really feels like the county still sets everything up as great as they can, and then the city only comes through and takes the icing off the top of the cake and leaves everything else behind. And it doesn't feel very equitable. Feels like we do a lot of work for them, and it's a very one-way relationship. And I'm not just saying that the kids got to eat their peas before they eat the ice cream, but it feels like some of these, and I know I'm soapboxing here, but I mean, we've seen some stuff that's been in UGAs for generations and has not been incorporated. We should either release them or make the city take them. And how can we do that?
I don't know the answer to that question, but we'll look into it.
We'd have to lose it in a poker game.
I'm ready to deal. I'm ready to deal.
I thought Commissioner Casino was going to say, if you discourage islands, do you also discourage long stretched out things like Lacey?
Like Martin Way, yeah, like Martin Way from the top of Nisqually Hill.
That's been
to
in
the city
place for
line.
so long.
Yeah.
Probably longer than I've been alive, so, you know, and that's a long time. It's really difficult to put pressure on the cities to do things they can't afford to do. Yeah. So this is a close-up look at the southern area of the Tumwater UGA. The pale green is the city of Tumwater, and then it shows the zoning designations that the county has. So those are the colored, different colored parcels there, areas. The gray is light industrial, yellow is single family low density. There's a little bit of olive over here, that's single family medium density. The orange is multifamily medium density. The green is parks and open space. I think that area over there on the east is along the Deschutes River and is not developable, so it's an open space area. There's a little tiny pink area up here that is neighborhood commercial. So those are the zoning designations in the Tumwater UGA. This is,
Go ahead,
yes,
Mr.
back.
You started there.
I was gonna ask, could you say more about what neighborhood commercial is and residential sensitive resources?
That was my question, was residential sensitive.
Yeah, that is an areas that might have wetlands or areas that are difficult to develop densely. And so they will always be a low density, single family.
My property is residential sensitive resource you can see it on that map, but it's inside the city of Tumwater. It's 2.5 acres. I can have my home, it's non-conforming, but I can't build anything else.
Right.
I
Is it a
built a
wetland
chicken coop, I put it on
situation?
wheels, so it's a trailer, it's not a chicken coop.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I have a comment and a question. I'm stunned to see that the Olympia Municipal Airport is actually in Tumwater. That is a surprise. And then I'm wondering in particular about a piece of land would be in the far southeast corner, down Old 99, just past the border, is a very densely populated area of several new developments. There's no plan to include that in UGA?
Off 93rd you're talking about?
Off 99, Old 99.
99 and 93rd?
No, well, that too, but in particular, there's several new housing developments south of the airport on 99 that are not in the UGA or in the city. Yeah, No, I'm sorry, over to the right,
Under the orange there.
over to the right.
That orange area.
Actually, yeah, down that way. So it's off, it will be actually off the map, but it's it's very close. I'm just
I
curious
haven't
about
heard
that.
anything that's proposed to be included in the UGA or even annexed into the city. I haven't heard.
It's fascinating because when you're driving on Old 99, it feels like you're just in the same area.
Yeah.
But then you see the Tumwater city limit sign and you think, whoa, this,
Where have I been?
That might be in the UGA.
I know it would be hard to develop it in the county without water sewer, if it is dense, and so I was just gonna look it up on the map and
it
see.
is dense because
Wait.
I ran for office in the 35th district and that's in the 35th and there were a lot of doorbells there.
The only thing here that I'm seeing where there's that kind of development
Is that black area?
is the black area.
Yeah, this area,
That
it
would-
could be this right here.
Cause
It
that's,
seems like it's further out, but it
Hmm.
could be this.
the line is
Those are-
93rd
those are parcel
Avenue,
lines
right?
making
Uh-huh,
really
uh-huh.
dark there.
That
Yeah.
line that goes across there, well, below 88th,
Mhm,
right at the border,
Right,
that is
right.
93rd Avenue.
mhm.
I've heard I've heard conversation about, when you have the line between the UGA and the county being right down the middle of a road like 93rd there, that you end up with development on one side of the road, not on the other. And some folks have been questioning whether maybe the line should be like one property south of the road so that you have consistent development along the road, but then you get more rural beyond that. Is that something that,
Kind of have that along here, you can see.
yeah,
it's
okay,
93rd.
yeah,
So the UGA straddles both sides of this main thoroughfare here, 93rd.
Especially if the
Yeah,
structures in the
so-
street.
That is
Right.
done sometimes.
if the sewer is there anyway. And I know that there's a particular interest in the intersection of 99 and 93rd. Because there's interest in developing the south side of that intersection or the southwest.
And that is a proposed docket project.
Okay.
And it's actually coming in as probably the first UGA swap,
Ah.
maybe in the state.
Okay,
I don't know. I haven't heard, haven't heard another county get an application for a UGA swap.
let's get on it. We can be number one.
And
If
you
it
can
makes
hear
sense,
more
we can
about
get-
that February 14th in a
Careful
briefing
what you ask
to the
for.
board.
So then we'll take a look at the western sub area zoning. That's between, again, the city of Tumwater is the pale green. So the county UGA is largely between the city of Tumwater and Black Lake. And then there's some area down here off of Little Rock. There's a lot more single family low density here. There's some general commercial. Neighborhood commercial serves little commercial areas like a store that might serve a neighborhood. Did you ask about that?
No.
Someone asked about that. Yeah, so it's, it might be a tavern, might be a store, might be just a little place that's fairly rural, but a lot of people go there for, their daily needs, like a beer or whatever. The orange up here on Black Lake is multifamily. I think those are actually mobile home parks. And again, the green is some parks and open space. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about the Tumwater UGA. So the city of Tumwater provided their development code to staff. That's Title 22 of the Thurston County Code. Let's see. We often refer to it as Development Code, Land Use Code, Thurston County Code, or just the code. So you'll hear all of those terms. You'll hear all of those terms, and what we mean is the regulations that regulate development in all of those areas. So we hope to, well, let me see where I am here. I've gotten off track. So again, remember that the development code implements the goals and policies in the joint plan. So the goal is to make our codes and our joint plans match the cities as closely as possible. We did get last year, Tumwater's most recently adopted code. Staff has been busy comparing what we adopted previously to the new code. And and updating it where it's necessary. There aren't a lot of major changes, but there were two notable changes. One is that the city of Tumwater adopted some very robust design guidelines. We'll talk about those a little more in detail here in a minute. And then there's another section that's pretty big in the code, and it's some incentives, some density bonuses for affordable housing, permanent affordable housing, only in multifamily zoning designations. It's a bigger section of code, but it doesn't have a great impact, unfortunately. It's like if you make 2 of your units permanently affordable, we'll give you 2 extra over the maximum density. It's kind of a minor impact, but it is a big section of code that you'll see has changed.
I think we have a question.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna ask about that specifically, if there's anything that we can do on our end to support or increase that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, and this is, I wish I had a chart. So housing, well, going back to this development code update is based on currently adopted comprehensive plans. Most of those comprehensive plans were set based on data from 2016. In the next year and a half, you all will be engaging with the most robust housing update this region has done probably ever. And it's going to be, I mean, it will hopefully be game changing for the cities and for the county to really delve into what does it mean to accommodate housing at all these different income levels? How do you break down the silos between land use and services, and figure out funding pieces and whatnot? All that to say, I think there's like the code update that we are working on right now to try to address as many of these like conflicting pieces of code that exist. And then we're gonna have to go back in and do a housing update probably next year. So this might be a little bit iterative, and we might have to say like, wait on that one, like on that particular piece, because we're gonna come back with a way more updates related to housing once Tumwater gets through their analysis and like their work and we get through ours. But we are on the hook for that from the state's perspective, that not only will we update our comprehensive plan for housing, but that our joint plans and joint codes will also be updated for housing as part of the periodic review. So more to come, and yes.
So a lot of that
We're
is,
looking for those opportunities.
a lot of that is gonna be predicated on the city's process running first, and then
We'll have some, we're
Consistency,
doing
essentially.
some regionally. So regionally, we did a preliminary, or we're calling it like a provisional housing allocation. We regionally are gonna be doing a land capacity analysis. And then we're gonna go back and update that allocation, cause it's not necessarily gonna work. It's not gonna work for rural Thurston County. Anyway, so, and then that is gonna set off a whole series of both technical work as well as policy work.
I'm also super curious about affordable housing bonus incentives, and you mentioned you didn't think it was gonna have much impact or a big impact. Is that just because it's so limited to just being like 2 equals 2 extra, or is it because you haven't heard that developers are excited about doing this, or
All
other
of the
reasons?
above. I talked to the city of Tumwater recently and said, how are you implementing, or what's the mechanism you're using to manage that program? And he said, well, nobody's applied for it yet. That's one reason. The second reason is that there's not a lot of multifamily zoning in the UGA at this time. And so it's not gonna have that big of an impact there. And the other is that it is really like, if you make 2 of these units affordable, then we'll give you 2 extra units. So it's all of those reasons, and it could be more robust. And after we do this affordable housing update in this comp plan, I think we're gonna see some major changes to a lot of these goals, policies, and codes. There's no question. We have to, the state mandates it.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bartlett, go ahead.
Yeah, just sort of a follow-up on that specifically, that incentives aspect, because that was something I was really interested in. Yeah, it makes sense to me that developers who can basically charge whatever they want for property at this point, or who can go for these very, very expensive, very high-end ones, would not be particularly interested in providing affordable housing if they can get away with it. Is there anything we can do about the if they can get away with it part? Like, can we put caps in the other direction? Is that something that we can do?
Can we put caps what?
On high cost housing. Unaffordable housing.
housing, yeah.
Yeah,
Above market rate housing.
Yeah.
that for specific areas.
I would be against that anyway, since we don't have enough housing in every income bracket to put limits on any income bracket when we're short in every income bracket seems counterproductive.
Yeah, that was actually one of the findings of the housing allocation, I think surprised everybody. It was like, wait a second, we went above and beyond what the state told us to do, and we looked like the 80% to 120% of the area median income, and it was shocking. It was like, we are also a region that is missing that housing in that bracket. And the impacts are that if you have folks missing housing in that bracket, then they're driving up the prices in other brackets. It's like this cascading effect, and just realizing like, I mean, obviously the focus of the housing update is gonna be on those lower income brackets. But it's like, oh, need more of everything everywhere. And so one of the pieces of the housing update that will be interesting, and it relates to the design guidelines, is it's a review of barriers. So there's incentives, there's also like, what do we have in our codes already that just make it really hard to build housing?
Affordable housing.
Affordable
especially.
housing, and so one of the things, like, we were looking at the design guidelines, and they have design guidelines for housing. It's like, well, I'm sure they add cost, some kind of cost, to comply with design guidelines. So it's looking at like, is that a barrier? Is it a barrier to housing being, affordable? So yeah, there's a lot of different pieces.
So am I hearing you correctly? We have a shortage of housing in every market bracket?
Pretty
in the
much.
county?
Yep.
It's hard to wrap my head around.
It is.
I'd just
It's,
comment though that, if developers are building housing in a particular, price range, it's because people are there to purchase it. They're not gonna build things that aren't sellable. And so, in that way, markets are relatively efficient. And so we need more housing, period. Right? It's not that we should be building this instead of that. We need to build more of everything. And when we're all full up on this, they'll quit building it. We won't have to tell them to, because they won't be able to sell it.
Point of order. Chair, I would request that we ask the members of the commission to, if a fellow commissioner expresses an opinion and is asking staff for information on that, I don't think it's fair for other commissioners to then say, I disagree with your opinion. We all have our different opinions, but we should not direct our opinions at fellow commissioners.
I think we will direct our questions to staff then. We can.
That was not my intention. Apologies.
I mean, for everybody.
I neither then.
it is going to be it's going to be a complex body of work. And I just really appreciate that all of you have signed up to engage in it with us.
True. So let's see, as I said, the proposed changes in Title 22 are really not that major. I've gone through almost all of it. I'm still working on the design guidelines. It is a separate booklet that the city of Tumwater adopted, and their code points to it for every zoning designation. Don't forget to look at the design guidelines, because you'll need to know those too. And that booklet is hundreds of pages. So I've been struggling with how we're gonna deal with that. So we'll get your thoughts on that tonight. So some of the design guidelines, this is an example of an illustration. This is for a mixed use area where there are generally commercial or retail, maybe restaurants below with apartments above. It calls for a broad pedestrian area big enough for outdoor seating. So that's called pedestrian open space. There's a lot of that in there. It also addresses parking lot design, which we already do that. But this, I think there's a greater focus on pedestrian safety from transit locations and from your car to get to an entrance and just kind of better flow for, with pedestrians in mind. I would say these landscaping requirements are beefed up a bit and things like more shade trees in parking lots and other things too. We already have landscaping design guidelines in all of our codes. There are requirements for, commercial builders. And then they have very specific architectural requirements for the city of Tumwater. And they would love us to adopt all of these design guidelines in the urban growth area. So we'll get your thoughts on that here soon.
Are CDs and tapes allowable uses in those zones?
Yes, so.
There appears to be a video rental store in that as well.
It looks very generic, doesn't it?
So the plan is.
Okay, we've got a question.
Oh,
Sorry, I would love the jokes, but seriously, are there in the architectural guidelines paint limitations, like you can paint it these colors and not these other colors?
you know,
Feels that way in Lacey.
I don't know if there are paint color guidelines. There are definitely like, I'm gonna give an example because it's a picture in their book. The mattress store with all the animals, the farm animals out there, they say that's not an acceptable design feature. You know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Mattress Ranch.
Yeah, Mattress Ranch, that's it. And
I know, I really like that.
How dare you have something charming?
they're not gonna shut them
Right.
down. They're not gonna say you have to take the cows away, but going forward, the plan is. Anyway,
Did you?
I would say it's mostly about having covered, and not mostly, there are a lot of things. You can't have build a big warehouse in a commercial area that's really ugly. They want to have things that break that up. They want to have
Only allowed in
covered
that part.
openings for, public entrances so that you're not standing in the rain trying to get the door open.
There's been an effort in some areas in Tumwater, sorry, I was on the planning commission for 6 years, but there's been an effort to not have as many parking lots between the sidewalk and the building.
Yes.
They're just trying to, on certain streets, there's been an effort to make the city more pedestrian friendly, more transit friendly, more human scale.
And more
in the places
attractive,
that you
frankly.
move through it.
Yeah,
Commissioner
that,
Casino, you had a-
Yeah, that was actually the point I wanted to see if we could, are we going to be able to address parking requirements? And can our parking requirements then motivate Tumwater? Or will Tumwater's parking requirements motivate us? Cause I would like us to kind of lead the charge on how we deal with parking and the amount of space that we let cars use between streets and parking lots and everything else. 1/3 of our cities are pavement and it's not ideal. It's
You brought the bus
suboptimal.
tonight.
we weaved in
Great.
DDSC.
And that would actually, I mean, that's obviously a cost of development. So if we get rid of some parking requirements for developers, they might be able, instead of 2 parking stalls, we have 1 more housing unit. That's fantastic. That's a win as far as I'm concerned.
I would say that Tumwater has already addressed a lot of these parking standards and reduced the parking requirements.
Can we push that through everywhere else in our comp plan and our continuing plans?
Well, the
Yeah.
cities have done it, so the UGs should follow suit.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, the codes that we currently have on the books for the UGAs are, how old is the current one for
Oh.
water?
I can't remember.
Is it-
I'd say 20 years maybe.
Yeah.
It's been a long time since we updated the codes. As you know, we were short of staff for a long time and we're working real hard to get caught up.
Yeah, and having read through lots of design guidelines in my day as a planner, I would say Tumwater is definitely more on the spectrum of like functional, like having it be the pedestrian oriented design elements rather than just pure aesthetic. And changes to building modulation, breaking up big surfaces, trying to integrate more landscaping, both vertically, horizontally,
Space.
Mhm.
green space for stormwater purposes. Like it is a more functionally grounded design guideline handbook than like what you might see for
Oh, here we go.
Seattle's transit oriented development districts or something,
I was
so.
wondering who you're gonna call out.
I'm most familiar with the Seattle ones because I lived in like one of the light rail station
We
districts.
lived in the right.
Light rail station district.
No parking slot.
Oh, that'd be all right.
Casino parking.
Picture of you every time we put a new housing unit over top. of
Nobody will
someone
buy,
else's
nobody will
space.
buy.
So,
Parking requirements are a tax on people that can't afford cars.
Yep. Yeah. More
Yeah,
bedrooms,
well,
less bed,
Bill,
less
do you have a
parking.
This is time check.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's
Yeah.
5 minutes left for this agenda.
thank you. So we hope to get a red line draft of the Tumwater Development Codes to you this spring. Ideally, we will have a public hearing and possibly a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners by early summer. That is pretty ambitious, but you know me, the people who've been here for a while know that I'm an ambitious planner. Anyway, so what we're going to do next is plant a seed for the development guidelines. And what I've done is print out, because we didn't send this to you earlier, we will send the links to materials later, and in the spirit of conserving paper, I've only made 6 copies. You'll have to share with a neighbor. But what I have printed out here are chapter 22.43 design review guidelines that are already adopted through Title 22, the Tumwater UGA code. Just for fun, I printed out the 2250 off-street parking standards. So these are the kinds of things that are addressed in the Tumwater guidelines. This is the industrial zoning designation chapter of the new Tumwater design guidelines, so that you can kind of start getting a feel. And what we'd like from you tonight is to kind of just give them a cursory look, talk about them, and give us some ideas on whether you think we should adopt them wholesale, or if we should pick and choose how we should do it. There are different ways, and I think you'll talk about this a little bit. I'll hand these out, and Ashley will.
Are those
Yeah.
available on the planning commission website as well? Are they linked?
Not that particular piece, but we'll send out links. It's on Tumwater's, the design guidelines. We don't want to confuse folks yet. The county, because we haven't adopted them. But in terms of like.
Bless you for making less cost.
Yeah. In terms of code, there are a few ways to go about code and when you're updating it. And so like you can incorporate something by reference. So like as we're updating, chapter 22, we can essentially just refer to Tumwater's design guidelines. The benefits of doing that, or if they make updates to them, we're not constantly having to go back in, because it's a big process to update code. We don't have to necessarily go back in and like update them on our end just because Tumwater has updated them. So you can actually adopt sections by reference. You can adopt the whole thing with exclusions. So there are ways to do it where, we could say, like I would throw out there that maybe multifamily and single family, they have chapters related to that. Maybe those are ones that we don't want to adopt this year because they might get updated. Or we adopt it and then as they get updated, that will automatically be reflected. So that's one way to go about it, is like just adopt it by reference, or incorporate it by reference. Another way to go about it is go through each of those sections of their design guidelines and pull out pieces that, might be more relevant for a UGA. The way they're set up right now is like, basically if it's applicable. But we could actually go through and do that work to say, well, this will never be applicable because it's, it's too focused on a city. And so that would be work that we could do with staff to like, okay, these ones are gonna be more applicable. We'll go ahead and actually pull them out and put them in the UGA code in chapter 22, and be very specific. That a lot of times, that can be easier for folks that are trying to get a permit. It's like all in one place. They don't have to go to our document and then go to some other document. So that's another way to do it. And then the third option is maybe design guidelines aren't appropriate for the UGA. And maybe when those areas get annexed, is when those design guidelines, should be applied. So I'm sure there's in between options there, but I just kind of wanted to lay out those 3 buckets and just kind of get a temperature read on what the planning commission thinks, because What we don't wanna do is go down one path and it's like, we're gonna incorporate it by reference, that's really easy, and you're like, no. And then it's probably a good month, 2 months worth of work to like do it the other way, where you're going in section by section. And vice versa, like if you wanna see it section, anyway, so. I'll stop
The
talking.
reason I copied the industrial chapter is because there is so much industrial zoning designation in the Tumwater UGA, both the south and the west side. So I just picked that randomly. There's a chapter for every zoning designation, and they all have parking lot design, landscaping. So and then you can see from what I handed out that we also have very scant design review guidelines already in the code. So this is going to be the biggest change in the Tumwater UGA code. No matter what we do, aside from not doing anything, it'll be the biggest change that we have.
So if we took the tactic of deciding how we were going to adopt different codes, would we be stuck with it for all of our city partners? So if we wanted to adopt by reference with the city of Tumwater, because the Thurston County Planning Commission appreciates the city of Tumwater's planning abilities, but then there's other municipalities that we're a little bit more hesitant to adopt by reference because they might not have the same values and visions that we believe that the county does. Would we be able to, would we be forced to adopt them by reference as well?
Not necessarily, no, they're all looked at, they're all separate chapters and they would all go through their own processes.
Okay.
And I don't know the level of work that other jurisdictions have gone into creating these, ground truthing them, like they have been in place for about 7 years now. And so we can definitely get feedback from them on things that have worked, things that haven't worked.
Thank you, that answered.
I'll just start off. I am fully opposed to adopting Tumwater's stuff by reference. Because we have a commissioner here. I think what you guys are doing by doing that is telling people that live in the UGA that they don't matter. Because Tumwater has, we're all worried about outreach. Has Tumwater ever done any outreach to UGA residents? How many UGA residents go to Tumwater City Council meetings or Tumwater Planning Commission meetings? We're like, how many people go to Thurston County? And that's, to me, that's a big issue. That's something that came up in our last Tumwater. There is now a recommendation in the county's comp plan that we accept all these different codes from Tumwater. One of those is their ag code. You know what their ag code says? No agriculture, no commercial agriculture. Well, these are people that might not be in the city of Tumwater in my lifetime. And we're gonna tell them, 20 years, we don't care if you're in the county or in the city, you can't do agriculture anymore. And there's really arbitrary limits on what you can do in Tumwater. They say the number of chickens you can have, the number of any kind of animal you can have. You cannot have a rooster. So.
Don't tell them about my roosters.
I really don't think that doing it by reference is a good idea, because I think it takes what little power we have as a county. And this is my next problem with joint planning in Thurston County, is the memorandum of understandings. Because, I've done a lot of these. We've been told everything from, well, you guys have this leeway here, to we've had staff come in here and say, this is what the city's doing. This is what the county's going to do. And, it doesn't matter, because we have this agreement that we're going to do what the cities do. When I still contend that according to the Growth Management Act, the county is the planning authority for Thurston County, not the cities.
I have a direct question. just to clarify.
I'm fine.
I'm with you on especially domestic livestock and the agricultural restrictions, which I also find really laborious. What would your alternative be? How would are you looking at us going through this, sort of be like, all right, well, this agriculture section shouldn't apply. But this section that's talking about the way that buildings are put together, I'm okay with that. Or are you more like, let's start fresh?
I'm like, I think I'm kind of like, let's look at what works.
Mhm.
And we can adopt that.
Okay.
But what doesn't work, we shouldn't allow Tumwater to say, you know, this is the way we see it. Thurston County has said we're going to adopt Tumwater's rules, basically by saying, you know, what's the word? By reference.
Incorporating. Well, and those ones wouldn't necessarily be incorporated. The reason that I mentioned it for this is because even their own code, like Tumwater's own code, references this design handbook. Is that how it's
Yes,
set up?
yes.
It is like a separate document that lives even outside of their code. And so it'd be doing a similar thing to the way the city of Tumwater has set it up. So they didn't actually go through and update each of their individual chapters in their own development code. They created this sort of comprehensive design guideline handbook, and then their code refers out to it.
Excuse me, but their planning department approves plans based on a handbook?
Well, there's still zoning regulations that have bulk setbacks, height requirements, all of the usual things. But then these are an additional thing to design a site, to design parking lots, to design a building that must be met to create a sense of place, to make things more attractive, to create more shade in parking areas, to limit the size of signs maybe. So it's a very comprehensive booklet.
How do they enforce that?
It's incorporated into their code.
Yes.
It's like the joint plan is incorporated into the comprehensive plan, but it lives on its own. It's very
Yeah,
similar.
it just says, go look at this document and
Work that was only done by complaint because they don't have enough staff to do anything else.
That's Thurston County's way too.
Yeah.
So I guess the question would be, since these are separate, you're saying,
Except for the sign code.
who's writing these? Is this something that the city has said we're going to adopt this by reference and then staff writes it? Or is it something that
Well,
goes
this-
through the planning process?
it goes through the planning process. It was actually done by consultants. And then it went through their planning commission, their city council, their public process, whatever that is, and was ultimately adopted. And so it is part of their code, but it is a separate booklet. Yeah.
Which is how it is. It's often done that way, just so it's a more holistic document. It's got lots of pictures and those aren't often put into codes for better or worse.
Well, I mean, for that, if it's done that way, I think that makes sense because the thing we run into a lot of times when we change something in one place, there's a lot of time spent running back and
Yes.
changing it in other
Yeah.
places.
Yeah.
So if we were to take an approach like Commissioner Nelson is proposing and look at specific pieces of this, we'd probably want to be able to identify where those are. Like versus the pieces that we're comfortable with versus the pieces that we would want, you know, either more engagement before we signed off on or that we think are problematic from a policy standpoint, from the county's point of view. Like, how big is this stack? How much are we digging through? What does it mean for us if we take that tact?
It's a huge document.
So you just have one chapter.
Yeah, it's 41 pages, the industrial zoning designation chapter.
Pictures.
It is a lot of pictures.
I know, it's really clear what
Mhm.
they're after. That's the nice thing about a document like that is they put everything in there. But
Smell of
it's a big deal to go through the whole thing. I've done it. And pare out stuff, you know, okay, this doesn't make sense, this doesn't, I've actually done that work already on this document. And then Ashley said, let's check with the planning commission and see what they want. But
Well-
I just did this for 2 months.
I know it would, but even then, I mean, it's, that work has been done, but even reading through it, there's a lot of, it
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily, like the check on whether it all hangs together, once you start pulling pieces out,
Right.
it's going to be challenging. And then figuring out exactly where you put them in, you know, the new code, because right now it all exists in one separate document. But then if you start thinking about the way chapter 22 is written, you know, we've got parking in one chapter. We've got our underlying zones in separate, you
Right.
know, sections, I should say.
It's a little bit overwhelming for me, so I know that it will be for you to go through there and kind of parse it out.
But it won't, I think creating, like ideally we'd be able to do this, like it existed here in the design guidelines handbook and this is where it exists in the code, like that will be very difficult, like that roadmap to go through. Because it's gonna be broken up into so many different pieces once you pull it into the code. So I'd say if you want it to be integrated into the code, just know what our limits are probably gonna be in terms of that like tracking.
So I think it sounds like some of these might be easier to do than others. I'm thinking about, you know, I think Commissioner Nelson's, what I hear in Commissioner Nelson's concern is this like, what are we doing in this transition time between it being UGA and it being incorporated? And what are we giving up in the interim? And those feel like a more limited set of issues. I think then like we're gonna pick through the entire thing and nitpick parking requirements. But that feels to me like probably, I don't know how the rest of the commission would feel, but probably the place where we would have the most impact. And probably the place that is most likely to get lost in this kind of temporal shuffle between UGA and incorporated area.
Pages of the total booklet.
You know, I haven't counted, but that one chapter's 41, so I'm guessing around 250 pages.
Okay.
Would we as a group have appetite for a comb through subcommittee?
Have an appetite to get the complete document.
Yeah, we'll send a link to that so you can look at all of it.
Yeah, actually, you
It-
know me, I don't
Yeah.
want the link. I
Oh.
want a hard copy.
It's actually a really great thing for a city. I don't think it necessarily translates really well for the UGA.
Yeah, well, that's what I need to.
It's a beautiful document.
Yeah.
It's beautiful and their ideas are beautiful.
This is really nicely done.
Yeah,
It is, and I mean, so if you read through the way that it's written, like focus on things like it is only if applicable. So any development that comes in, they would only go to those sections that are applicable. So they have limitations on like applicability related to the size of your development or when something applies based on the size of your addition. So it's not like the whole document or whole chapter would even apply. It would only be those things that are applicable. And there's a lot of references in there, like whole sections in each one of those chapters of the guidelines. Around these corridors that Commissioner Hanson referenced. So like those corridors don't necessarily even exist in the UGA. So like that whole section, like it wouldn't even be applicable. Regardless of how it gets pieced up, it's like, even if it was referenced, incorporated by reference, that still wouldn't apply.
I was just gonna say, I just looked through this one, and there's definitely large chunks of this that I think are really valuable that are functional. And then there are large chunks of it that are purely aesthetic and are not functional.
fluff. We call it fluff.
And I feel like if the subcommittee happened pre-categorizing that stuff so that we could just say, these were deemed primarily aesthetic and will not be looked at type of situation would really help reduce that pile down. Cause I'd say about half of this industrial chapter is just aesthetics. Paint colors, brand identities, material choices, building heights, you know, yeah, things that shouldn't matter in a UGA and are really only for main thoroughfares. And if they did eventually annex one of these UGAs that space would further develop before it would hit a point where they would even want to necessarily enforce some of those aesthetic choices anyway. I think.
Okay, so we're about 15 minutes over on this agenda item. So if we wrap this up, I think we've talked about a couple things. So is there some ability for, like, would it be a crazy ask to have some sorting of the document? Like where we might want to focus? Or do we want to take a raw document and hand it off to the subcommittee?
There's also an option, I'll just throw out there, that Leah has done a lot of the work, and if a red line version is an easier way to digest.
Would be a great starting
I
point.
can't say that I used the filter of aesthetics. I did not necessarily do that. What I did was, for my experience as a planner, take the things out that didn't make sense to me. So I do have a redlined version that I kind of made notes in. I struck a bunch of things, and you know, the criteria may be different for a subcommittee, but that's where I started.
Did you do that on track changes and work?
Yes.
That kind of best professional judgment, I think, would be invaluable to a group like us.
Yeah.
I'd love to get that on my email.
Okay,
Okay.
Same.
can I get volunteers for a subcommittee? To look through that, or do we want to do,
Had a follow-up to that.
or do we want to do individual work and reconvene?
I can't do a subcommittee right now.
I'd like to look at the document first.
Yeah, and we have it
And then we
scheduled.
may get to where we like come in and we're like, we don't even need this subcommittee.
Okay, so you want to get us a red line copy, but we move
Yeah,
on.
and
Yep,
I agree with this, but I just wanted to check in about, I mean, it sounds like a lot of us are coming into this with some pretty specific values and focuses on what our subsection is, what we want to focus on. I think that it would be really valuable to us as commissioners if we kind of had an idea of that from each other. If there's a way that we can build that in a little bit of after we've had a chance to look at this document and go through it a little bit of sorting ourselves a little bit more naturally in terms of like, all right, we want to focus on some agriculture stuff, and we want to focus on some parking stuff or something like that, like.
okay, I think that's a great idea. So if you're gonna send this via email out to the group, why don't we all commit to respond with interest areas? And then if you could compile those and share those, we're not shooting emails and.
Yep,
serial form.
so, yes, few logistics.
Okay.
The version that Leah's been working on wasn't necessarily intended to be shared right away, so give us some grace, some time for
Yeah.
Leah to actually like turn it into a document that is gonna be more useful for you. So that might be a few weeks. We are scheduled to come back with this March, the first meeting in March, and maybe that is a good time, so it's still fresh,
There is the word
Sometime.
tentatively scheduled in.
tentative, like,
I keep adding that.
and then one final thing, yes, all emails get sent to Tasha from individual commissioners, so who you receive the packets from. Tasha is amazing. She'll make sure that it gets to staff. Cause otherwise we risk, having discussions.
Okay,
That answers my question. I was a little concerned that we were all gonna be bothering you guys about that.
keeps us square.
Yep, if you just send them to Tasha, we can compile them and then make sure that they're sent out to the rest of the group. I assume that a compilation is better than like you receiving 10 separate emails, so
And
we'll compile whatever we have before the next meeting.
yeah, and that is an OPMA requirement, so if we accidentally create a serial quorum, like we're violating the OPMA, so that's how we stay square on the OPMA. So,
And do your training.
yes, and each of you is expected to do an OPMA training that I believe you all have sent us information on.
It's gonna be sent. We wanted to
Okay.
do we wanted to just get it on your radar, and then we'll be sending that out.
Yes.
If you haven't already done it in the last 4 years.
The outgoing chair for the training wheels. Okay, I think that wraps us up on that agenda item, and we will move on to a staff update.
So we're still fully staffed? Yes, last month was the first time that we've been fully staffed. We still are.
Boss is out interviewing for jobs.
Yeah. You can give us an update later on that one. My team is fully staffed, although we do have two people on my team that are out on maternity leave, raising amazing tiny humans. Maya did have her baby. She said I could announce. Audrey. Anyway, and just want to get on your radar. So we did give you a quick docket update at the last meeting. We have now briefed the board with just like the process side of docketing. And for those of you who are new, docket is really the work plan for the planning commission. So it's nice to see what's coming up. The specific project information will be given to given to the board on February 14th. Along with chocolates, if you wanna come. We'll be sure at the February 21st meeting to just give an update, like an abbreviated version of what we shared with the board. And in the meantime, we already actually have a robust survey up on the website so that folks can go in there and comment by project. And then we'll be adding project sheets and all kinds of additional information, but really trying to up our game in terms of being transparent about docketing and collecting as much comments as possible. The community outreach report, I mentioned it just got published. That is on the Thurston 2045 website. And Miriam will be planning to come and share that with the Planning Commission. I think that's it.
All right, thank you. Any questions before we move on? Okay, we will move on to our calendar check with agenda items. So for our February 21st, 2024 meeting, is there anybody who knows they will not be available for that meeting? And same question for March 6th. So you can flip through your calendar.
I don't know where I am from one day to the next, but no, I'm good both those nights.
Okay, sounds good. Any questions on those two upcoming agendas? Okay, we'll move on to item 7.5, which is subcommittee report out. And I don't know if I'm allowed to act as chair of a subcommittee and chair of the planning commission anymore. I'd have to consult our parliamentarian.
Is that you, Kevin?
You want the report? You want me to give a report?
I'll have Commissioner Messenger give a report out on subcommittee work.
Commissioner Day said, you know, one of the rules in the rules of procedure for subcommittees is that at your first meeting, you have to elect the chair. And he said, if I become the chair, does that mean you have to be the secretary? So that was his motivation. I wrote the notes. Do you want the 2-minute version or the 10-minute version? Let's do 2. So just quickly here, everyone got passed around my email that I forwarded. This is just a summary of our conversations. We met and talked through things. There's some basic overall things like we need to just update the letterhead. It's got an old address. So we wanted to share that we've reviewed the document. This is how lengthy it is. These are the different components of it, 13 sections and what they primarily talk about. And then there's some areas that are probably just fine. A few areas that might be worthy of some changes or updates. Has everyone had a chance to read through this? Do you want me to, anyone want to ask any questions about any specific parts of what my notes say? I think, you know, the thing that we should probably initially focus on is our meetings, because right now we've historically been meeting the first and third Wednesdays at 6:30 and public hearing times are at 7 p.m. If we want to change those, that's up to us. I'm not recommending that we do, but if it would be helpful for others, I'm open to meeting earlier or whatever might be best for people. So that's up to us as members of the commission to decide if we want to change our regular meeting times. We've got new commissioners, so maybe that's important for some people. I don't know. In terms of the, there's a couple elements that we've had some sort of heated debate in the past on. Mostly it centers on the last item, minutes, and the structure for that. And we went through some, you know, language of changing our notes to say that the official record is the audio recording. But that doesn't change what's currently in our rules of procedures about minutes. They don't address the concept of the record. they just simply say the minutes need to include all the following and should be, you know, including this, but not that. We don't exactly follow our current rules for minutes, so we should just decide. And it's probably best that we collaborate with staff to say, you know, what's gonna be workable for you, what's gonna be workable for us. No sense asking for things that are not gonna be possible or putting them in rules of procedure. So, really not suggesting a bunch of massive changes, just a bunch of minor ones. But I think some of them will improve clarity of things that get debated later because people can't, you know, be on the same opinion of what something translates to. There is some very strange language in there. Derek and I were talking about, I don't know if it was written by a lawyer or a lawyer trying to justify their existence, but
Somebody trying to sound like.
it didn't make logical sense. So we can clean some of that up. So that's my report unless there's any questions.
What are next steps?
That's a great question. That was
So I think we've got two things. One, I think, is there anybody else who'd want to be involved in the governance and procedure, whatever we call that,
rules
subcommittee,
of procedures.
rules of procedure subcommittee? Myself and Commissioner Pester.
Two of us.
And it was just formed last month, so you
Yep.
haven't missed much.
And I think the next steps would
Only have one
be
meeting.
to actually start with a markup version and to work with staff on some of the pieces that impact staff and have a nexus there.
By the way, this document that it's referencing is chapter 4 in your notebook here.
And the third step I would think would be to send out the marked up version to all the commissioners through Tasha and have everybody take a look at it before we come to another meeting and talk about it.
Yes, I think that's fair.
And I don't know, I like the thing of maybe meeting early, like 6 o'clock, but I don't know how that affects everybody else's schedule.
Should we do a straw survey, straw poll or something
For the subcommittee?
for meeting times?
Oh, for this meeting.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we could make a recommendation and send it out and see what the commission thinks.
Cause I know a lot of the staff, they stay here after normal work hours
Yeah,
and wait an
exactly.
hour for our meeting to start.
Exactly.
And I have no problem getting here by 6 o'clock. I don't know, what everybody else's issue is.
Yeah, the only commitment I have is reading materials, but so. How do we feel about that meeting time?
I like it.
I like 6 o'clock.
Is there anyone who would not want to
I,
make 6
I
o'clock?
like keeping it 6:30, just because, not now, but in a couple months, every minute every minute earlier I leave is stuff I'm not getting done at home. And I think when I started, we were meeting at 7. But you catch a 2.5, 3 hour meeting at 7 o'clock, and that's getting really late. I think the only reason that we left the hearings at 7 was because we wanted to make sure, you know, if you work till 5 or 6, that if we've got a public hearing, you have time to get here from wherever you are to show up to the public hearing if you want, because our regular meetings, this isn't too uncommon. There's maybe, I think we've got 2 people online. Maybe we get a couple people in the meeting room, but oftentimes, depending on the topic, oftentimes we get several people that show up for public hearings.
Did you have that?
Yeah, I also, I have a slight preference for keeping it at 6:30. What I would recommend maybe is having some of the subcommittees start meeting at 6. As like a bit of an alternative to that. I just have commitments that lead right up until 6, and then trying to get here on my bike from Tumwater is tricky.
Well, I
I
think
can pick you up on my way.
I think the subcommittee will take that under consideration, make a recommendation, then you can all decide how you feel about it.
If anyone can look at section 4 on page 2, the opening paragraph. Anyone can tell me what that means. Then I can recommend how to change it. It says, the chair shall preside over the meetings of the commission and may exercise all the powers usually incident to the office retaining, comma, however, comma, as a member of the commission, comma, the full right to have a vote recorded in all deliberations of the commission, period.
I would like to empower you to use the county's guidelines on communication, specifically the section called plain talk. Um,
Delete that.
and use that as you're updating it.
I was tracking through the first line.
Is it referencing Robert's rules and making an exception to it for the chair?
I don't think so.
That's the only thing I could
That's-
think that would make sense. It was trying to say.
That's what
this
I'm
is an
reading
exception.
is that sometimes in a committee, a chair does not have a vote.
It's making clear.
And
that
so I
the
think
chair
it's
does.
referencing that.
So it's carving out an exception. to
I
Robert's
don't quite
rules.
understand it, but I track it.
Okay, this is why I'm a Rusty's rules person.
All right, so does anybody else want to be added to that subcommittee? It is riveting. We haven't set a meeting and we probably told committee members.
Cause I have, some ideas on section 9 of all things,
Okay,
and,
would you like to be appointed to the subcommittee?
yes,
Okay,
yes.
all right. Commissioner Casino is now officially a member of the subcommittee. All right, folks, we are on to good of the order. Is there any good of the order?
I'll just make a quick comment. I had a interesting day yesterday. I was asked to participate in a panel of to interview the 4 candidates for the executive director job, or the 4 finalists for the executive director job at Port of Olympia. We had 4 very good candidates, including Josh Cummings from CPED. And I don't know what commissioners are going to do. But I do know that they have noticed that they will have a public meeting at 4 p.m. tomorrow to take a vote and probably select someone. And we will get an announcement probably at that point, and it'll be in the Olympian by the next day. It'll probably come out in the Jolt tomorrow night.
And you're gonna text us all though after it, right?
I'll be somewhere else, so I'll be waiting to read it in the Jolt.
All right, well, thank you. Any other good of the order? All right, with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Non-debatable.
All right.
Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you for your time. Together, we really appreciate it.
Thank you for all your work there.
I love it. I love it. This is my favorite thing right here.
Take it. No, you take it. I'll take it.
So.
Started right now. I was like, wait, no, it's-
Gonna have to.
Yeah. Oh, I'm gonna have
Yeah.
to leave mine every once in a while for somebody.
Yeah, section 9.
Somebody put it in the correct
All about-
order.